Data center sustainability. So I've talked about carbon neutrality and net zero in general terms, with a slight reference to our sector. But really what I want to do now is go into a bit more detail around the specific applications to data centers. The first thing I'd like you to think about is some of the statements that are currently being made by companies. We hear a lot about net zero from some of the larger companies in our sector, some of the larger multinational organizations. Are those announcements that are being made really commitments towards net zero? Firstly, are they merely talking about carbon neutral? Are they talking about genuine net zero? Are they merely marketing responses to what is ultimately a groundswell of opinion that feels we should be doing more in this area? Is it merely a response to the threat of regulation or legislation? Or are they actually making genuine strides to move in the right direction? And I think the jury's slightly out as to which one that is. I mean, there is absolutely 100% a greater potential for legislation and regulation. A number of governments around the world are saying, we are considering legislation for many sectors, but particularly the data center sector. We've got a pretty large target painted on our backs right now. We use an awful lot of energy. There's a lot in the media about the amount of energy that we consume, and it's very, very difficult for us to defend the use of that energy. I always say if we're talking about steel manufacture and manufacturing a ton of steel, we can demonstrate that we're improving our energy efficiency by using less energy to manufacture that ton of steel. Very, very difficult for us in the data center sector to do that. What is the ultimate product that we produce? Well, it's probably a service. And how do we measure the value or the energy intensity or the energy efficiency of that service? Really very difficult. Again, as I've already said, do these statements really mean carbon neutral rather than net zero? And I think you'll find they in many cases do. And I think it's worth, if you're hearing these statements or seeing these statements, then having a look at what's actually behind the statements to understand really what's going on. As I said in the previous slides, many of the elements that are required for genuine net zero go beyond just the control that's available to data center operators. Reusing waste heat or the performance of the IT load. All of those sorts of things are certainly things that can be applied, elements that can be applied. But actually, it requires to be far more joined up. All of us within our sector to be far more joined up. This isn't just about the building. This isn't just about the IT. This isn't just about the intervening network. This is also about the manufacturing processes. This is also about the way those systems are set up to work. Are they actually going to quiesce properly or just run flat chat without any load on? There's a lot of stuff that we can do in there to be far more joined up that we really haven't started to get involved in too much detail yet. What about the cloud? You'll hear a lot from cloud providers saying that they're basically reducing their or looking to reduce their carbon output, to reduce their emissions, and some have set 2030 targets. You know who they are. You've seen the statements. I think it's a bit of a challenge on the basis that certainly within the media, the uninformed media, admittedly, but within the media, often the large cloud providers, the hyperscalers, are seen to be exemplars of our business, of our sector, and that's not strictly true. They operate a very, very specific business model. They're effectively operating very large enterprise sites, so it's very difficult to compare those enterprise sites that they operate with the, dare I say, the more generic co-location sector. And they also have very, very focused, targeted equipment within those large enterprise sites. The hyperscalers define what is going to go in there. They have the luxury of being able to do that because they are effectively operating as an enterprise in that context. They define their own stack. They can run that stack very lean. They can do all sorts of things that, frankly, the rest of the sector may not be able to do. So I think the idea that they represent the sector as a whole is I think a little bit of a distraction, to be honest. And I think increasingly beyond that, the use of cloud really obscures a lot of the issues that we have in our industry in terms of trying to solve net zero issues and meet some of the net zero requirements. A lot of the time, we simply consider the data center to be a building, unfortunately, and that makes it very simple in a way. and it gives us some targets that we can aim for, but actually it's not the real problem. And I'm going to go into that in a bit more detail in subsequent slides. But cloud, I think, really does obscure the use of energy in our sector. And I think it's increasingly obscuring it. And I think that we don't really have a lot of data on the true energy usage within cloud. So again, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in subsequent slides. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, we're a long way from getting a grasp on Scope 3. You know, the embodied energy, the amount of energy that, the embodied carbon, the amount of carbon that we're actually using or outputting during the manufacturing process, during the refining process, and during the disposal process of equipment generally. Not just the building, again, not just the construction materials, but the IT materials, etc., etc.